ready for a deep dive into something kind of creepy, but also, like, super relevant to, like, everyone.
Definitely relevant, even if most people don't even know it exists.
Exactly. We're talking about a fungus called, Rhizoctonia.
See, there you just said a word that makes most people's eyes glaze over. Fungus.
Yeah.
But this stuff is, well, it's a silent saboteur.
No kidding. This article, it's from a company called Farmonaut, and they're doing some really cool ag tech stuff.
Yeah, Farmonaut's interesting. They're using like satellites and AI.
Right, wild stuff. But it was their article on Rhizoctonia that really got me. Like, this isn't just some niche problem for farmers. This impacts all of us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Rhizoctonia doesn't discriminate. It goes after like everything. Food crops, you name it. Rice, corn, soybeans, potatoes.
The strawberries I read.
Yep, strawberries too. And it's not just food crops either. Turf grass, ornamentals.
So that perfectly manicured lawn could be harboring a secret underworld of fungal warfare.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Most people, even gardeners who are usually pretty tuned in to this kind of thing, they don't really understand what Rhizoctonia is.
Okay, so Rhizoctonia 101. Break it down for us. What are we dealing with here?
Okay, so in the simplest terms, Rhizoctonia is a type of fungus. But it's not like the kind you see popping up on a hike, right? This fungus, it lives in the soil, and it's a major cause of plant disease worldwide.
And by disease, we're talking like root rot, damping off things that can really devastate a plant.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. Well, I guess interesting might not be the right word.
Try.
But maybe terrifying. Maybe. But you see, Rhizoctonia produces these things called sclerotia. They're these hardened masses of the fungus that can survive in the soil for years, like literally decades, just waiting for the right conditions to come along.
So it's like a ticking time bomb, just lurking there in the soil, waiting to strike.
That's a pretty good way to put it, actually, a ticking time bomb. And the problem is you often don't know it's there until it's too late.
Because you can't see it. It's all happening underground.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so challenging to manage.
So how do you know if a plant's been hit? Like, what are the telltale signs?
Well, that's the thing about Rhizoctonia. It can be a bit of a chameleon. The symptoms, they can vary depending on, the type of plant, the age of the plant, the environmental conditions. It can get pretty complex.
Okay, so not exactly a one-size-fits-all diagnosis then.
Right. But there are some common red flags to watch out for. You might see things like stunted growth, like the plants just aren't thriving the way they should.
Or wilting, maybe, even if you're watering them regularly.
Yep, wilting is definitely another one. And then if you look closer, you might see lesions on the stems or even on the leaves.
Lesions, you mean like wounds?
Kind of. They're these discolored areas, often kind of sunken in. It's like the fungus is basically eating away at the plant tissue.
It's a gruesome thought. And I'm guessing by the time you see those signs, the damage is already pretty extensive.
Unfortunately, yeah. That's often the case. You've got to remember, Rhizoctonia, it's a soil-borne pathogen. So it's attacking the plant from the ground up. And those roots, they're the lifeline of the plant.
So if the roots are compromised, the whole plant is in trouble.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the question of early detection. Because if you can catch it early enough, maybe you can prevent widespread damage.
You're absolutely right. Early detection is key. And this is where things get really interesting. Because remember that company we mentioned earlier, Farmonaut? They're doing some really cutting-edge work in this area.
Right, with the satellites and AI and all that.
Exactly. They're using this technology called multispectral imaging.
Multispectral imaging, that sounds awfully high-tech.
It is. But it's actually pretty cool once you understand how it works. Basically, they're using satellites equipped with these special sensors that can see beyond the visible light spectrum.
Okay, so hold on. Does that mean what I think it means? We're talking about spotting this fungus from space.
You got it. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
That is seriously wild, but also incredibly cool.
It really is. Because think about it, by the time we see visible symptoms of Rhizoctonia with the naked eye, it's often too late to do much about it. But with this technology, with multispectral imaging, we can potentially detect those subtle changes in plant health before they're visible to us.
So it's like an early warning system. Farmers can see that something's off with their crops, even if they look perfectly healthy from the ground.
Exactly. And that early warning, that can make all the difference.
So we can see it from space. Now what? What do we do if we find it?
Well, luckily, we've got some tools in the toolbox.
Like what? Give me the rundown.
So you've got your organic approaches.
Okay, so like all natural kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are chemical treatments.
Which, come with their own set of considerations, right?
For sure. Got to be mindful of the potential downsides
So
there.
walk me through it. Let's start with the organic methods. What's the first line of defense there?
Well, crop rotation is a big one.
Right, because different plants have different weaknesses. So switching things up keeps the fungus guessing.
Exactly. It's harder for Rhizoctonia to get a foothold if it's constantly having to adapt to new hosts.
Makes sense. It's like a moving target for the fungus. What else?
Another really cool technique is solarization.
Solarization. I don't think I've heard that one before.
It's actually pretty simple. You basically cover the soil with clear plastic when it's sunny, traps the heat, and bakes the soil, which can kill off the fungus.
So we're talking like a solar oven for your garden. I like it. It's like using the power of nature to fight back against nature. Pretty clever, right?
It is, and it's surprisingly effective,
Yeah.
especially in areas with, hot summers.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so those are a couple of good options on the organic side. But what about those situations where you need to bring in the big guns? What about chemical treatments?
Yeah, so chemical treatments can definitely be effective, but like I said earlier, you have to be careful with them.
Because of the potential environmental impact, right?
Right, exactly. You have to weigh the risks and benefits.
So it's not a decision to be taken lightly.
Not at all. And that's why a lot of experts are moving towards this idea of integrated pest management, IPM for short.
Okay, IPM. Break that down for me. What's the basic philosophy there?
So with IPM, it's not about relying solely on one solution, whether it's organic or chemical. It's about using a combination of strategies to manage the problem.
So like a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. You might start with something like crop rotation, right?
Yeah.
Then maybe introduce some beneficial microorganisms to the soil.
Which would compete with Rhizoctonia for resources.
Exactly. And then, if you need to, you can use targeted chemical treatments. But the idea is to use those chemicals sparingly, only when absolutely necessary.
So it's about working smarter, not harder. Using every tool in the toolbox, but in a way that's sustainable and minimizes any negative impacts.
You got it. And this is where that high-tech stuff we were talking about earlier comes in.
You mean like Farmonaut's satellite imaging?
Bingo. That kind of technology can play a huge role in IPM.
Because farmers can see what's happening in their fields even before there are any visible signs of a problem.
Exactly. And that allows them to make more informed decisions about how to manage the situation.
So instead of just like blanket spraying their fields with chemicals, they can target specific areas where Rhizoctonia is a problem.
Exactly. They can see where the fungus is, how it's spreading, and then they can choose the most effective strategy for dealing with it.
That's amazing. It's like having X-ray vision for your crops.
It really is. And this is just the beginning. There's a lot of exciting research happening right now with things like gene editing.
Gene editing, now we're really getting futuristic.
I know, right? But seriously, imagine being able to engineer crops that are resistant to Rhizoctonia.
So no more worrying about this fungus at all. Sign me up.
Right. It could be a game changer. And it's not just gene editing either. Artificial intelligence, AI, is playing a bigger and bigger role in agriculture.
AI? Like computers that can think like farmers.
Kind of. I mean, we're not quite there yet. But AI can analyze massive amounts of data, right? Like way more than any human could ever process.
So we're talking like data on weather patterns, soil conditions, plant health, all that stuff.
Exactly. And by analyzing all that data, AI can help us predict where and when Rhizoctonia outbreaks are likely to occur.
That's incredible. It's like having a crystal ball for your farm.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that kind of predictive power, it can make a huge difference in terms of preventing outbreaks and minimizing losses.
So it sounds like we're moving towards a future where we can manage Rhizoctonia much more effectively, maybe even get to a point where it's not the threat it is today.
I think that's definitely within reach, but it's going to take a combination of approaches: organic farming practices, smart use of technology, and continued research into new solutions.
It's like we're entering a whole new era of agriculture.
We are. And it's an exciting time to be involved in this field.
I bet. So we've talked a lot about how to fight back against Rhizoctonia, but the article we read, it also raised an interesting question.
Oh, and what's that?
It made me wonder if completely eradicating Rhizoctonia, like wiping it off the face of the earth, if that's even realistic or even desirable.
It's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like on the one hand, we want to get rid of this thing that's causing so much trouble, but on the other hand, is that even possible? And what would the consequences be if we did?
Right, because it's like Rhizoctonia, it's a natural part of the ecosystem, right?
It's been around a lot longer than we have, that's for sure.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, is the goal really to wipe it out completely? Or is it more about finding a way to coexist? to kind of keep it in check.
Right, because it's like we talk about a balance of nature for a reason.
Exactly. And it seems like with Rhizoctonia, at least, maybe the answer isn't about eradication. Maybe it's about finding that sweet spot where we can manage it effectively.
So it doesn't become a major problem for our crops and our food supply.
Exactly. It's about sustainability, right? Finding ways to farm and produce food in a way that doesn't harm the environment or disrupt those natural balances.
Which, when you really think about it, is a pretty good goal to have, right?
Absolutely. And it's something that we should be striving for, not just with Rhizoctonia, but with all aspects of agriculture.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Rhizoctonia.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From those microscopic sclerotia all the way up to satellites in space.
It really has. And it just goes to show you, even something as seemingly small and insignificant as a fungus can have a huge impact on our lives and on the future of our planet.
Couldn't agree more.
So the next time you're enjoying a delicious strawberry or admiring a lush green lawn, take a moment to think about the unseen world beneath the surface and all the fascinating and complex interactions happening down there.
Because there's a whole lot going on down there that most of us never even think about.
Exactly. And the more we learn about those interactions, the better equipped we'll be to create a healthier and more sustainable future for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.